Do you like games? I like games. Do you like games too? I like games too. I like games too.
Hey guys, Peter Franson here from ChristianGeekCentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions, and E3 is upon us. I want to give you just my initial reactions to the first game featured in Bethesda's E3 conference for this year, Doom. Now, I'm not a big shooter fan because I suck at shooters, but this is part of a historic series, and so I really, was curious as to what they were going to reveal, what the game would look like, and it looks really cool. I mean, if you're like me and you like just darkly themed sci-fi or fantasy or horror or stuff like that, then this game I think is going to catch your eye immediately. It has a dark sense of humor as well. I mean, there's a moment where they're trying to get access to this door, and in order to get access to it, they have to, it's got a handprint encoding thing, and so they take the severed arm off of the dead guy that had access to it, and they put it up to the scanner and stuff. And you guys can watch the video and check it out yourselves. It's got crazy, intense, gory combat, a dark sci-fi atmosphere. Hopefully, for me, it's got an easy mode and a cool campaign, because I'm not into multiplayer, but I mean, this looks like a cool, intense, scary world to kind of check out and do combat in and stuff like that. Even if the campaign isn't that great, I love this feature that they have that is going to allow people on multiple platforms to create these mods that will be available to everybody regardless of platform. So you'll be able to play this game on, say, PC or whatever, and then they've got a built-in modding tool where you can make scenarios and levels that then you can put on their, Bethesda's BethesdaNet server, I think is, yeah. And then other people can play that same thing. And so it looks like there's just tons of potential for people to create campaigns, essentially. So even if the campaign ends up being kind of short or whatever, there's so much potential for replay value here. So with that in mind, I really hope there is an easy mode for people like me who suck at shooters, who aren't interested in being competitive, but just want to inhabit and explore worlds created in video games like this one. One question I had as a believer is, in the multiplayer demo section, they showed a player gaining a power-up from a floating spinning pentagram, and I missed this detail, but in the post interview with the creator, they referred to that as turning into a demon. I missed if that's what was happening or not, but anyway, it just made me, take note, because to my knowledge, and I have very limited knowledge of the series, but I do have the Doom board game, which was produced years ago, has long been out of print. But the way they present these demons in the Doom board game is that they are interdimensional creatures. They're from another dimension. And while I think that's not a bad way to see the spiritual world, as being on these other dimensions, it was other dimensional in the non-scientific sense, where you open up a portal, you enter into this other dimension, and it's just another place that is still in three-dimensional space and time. It's not literally in the what we think of as another scientific dimension of width, depth, time, that kind of stuff. So I was able to look at that game and say, okay, well, the people are calling these creatures from another world demons, but they're not necessarily biblical demons or something, But now they're anchoring this idea of this of this pentagram to the demonology of this world, and the pentagram is that's a real world symbol that's associated with real world Satanism, and so that's the first time I've seen a very close link to the demons in this game, quote unquote demons in this game, to real world Satan worship, Now maybe there's been other instances of these kinds of symbology references in the past in the game series. I'm not familiar enough with it to know, but it did make me think, okay, how should we as believers feel about interacting with this kind of content? How can we engage in this kind of thing where we're getting power-ups from these symbols of Satanism, or even turning into a demon or something like that. How can we do that and not be sinning? The other thing that I thought about is in this world, what we saw is a lot of like guys with tons of testosterone. You just got that feel anyway. It wasn't necessarily a male protagonist carrying the gun around, but you got that feel. And like with these big old guns and stuff, and they're tearing into demons with chainsaws and stuff like that. And it made me think about the idea of empowerment. And should we feel empowered when it comes to being in a place like hell? And my thinking there is like, I don't know if we should like get into that kind of mindset of like feeling like, yeah, I'm tough enough for hell. Hell, separation from God, by our own choice. I mean, this whole scenario being presented in Doom is just ridiculous. I mean, that's not what hell is. Hell is separation, eternal separation from God. And but I mean, should we feel like that's an environment that we are tough enough for, or that we can even dominate and thrive in? And I'm not sure that's kind of a mentality that we want to validate. Now, I'm not saying that playing a game like this is going to, of necessity, validate that mentality, but it's just maybe something to be aware of. Is this game going to introduce that thought to my mind and make me kind of be thinking defiantly about the idea of hell, like, well, I don't mind going to hell, I'm tough enough for hell, or maybe we already have that mentality, and this is a game that's going to just kind of validate that way of thinking. I mean, you're probably not in that mentality if you're watching this, but I mean, I know a lot of people that aren't Christians, will tune into these videos sometimes too. But anyway, I would tend to think that that's not a very wise mentality to take. That I'm tough enough for hell. But this is just a video game, and this is just fantasy. So I think we can engage with this kind of content. But I'll get to that in a second about how I think we can do that. Let's see. Oh yeah, the other thing I was noticing as I was looking at when they would go to hell, the hell levels, I was like, okay, so once again, we've got another game that is validating what I think are inaccurate depictions and representations of what hell truly is. And I won't go into all the details now, but we have this vision of hell that involves fire and just like people on torture racks and chains and skulls and all this kind of stuff that is really taken from a long history of visual representations created by believers in the past that maybe were intended to be symbolic, maybe were intended to be literal, but either way, those depictions don't represent the biblical concept of hell. And I'll post a link in this video so you guys can see. I made a video a while back that talked about that and looks at what the Bible actually has to say and what it doesn't have to say about hell, so that we can differentiate between what we see typically in movies like Hellraiser and Event Horizon and Diablo and in games like the Doom series, so we can differentiate between these popular, excuse me, I'm spitting all over the place, so we can differentiate between these popular depictions of hell and what the Bible actually says about hell as you look at the text and understand the way in which it was written, the genre, and the metaphors being used there. So anyway, I'll try to put a link in this video to that. So how can we engage in this kind of content without sinning? I think we absolutely can. The first thing, as I mentioned before, is to recognize that it's fantasy. Recognize that it's fantasy, and that we don't have to believe in this world that's being created. We can suspend disbelief for the game experience, and then resume our disbelief when we put the controller down. Number two way that I think we can engage in this content without sinning is that and if the above, if that first choice, recognize the fantasy, is not enough, is to try to insert our own narrative. I mean, sometimes I don't do this very often unless I feel like I really want to or need to enjoy a game experience. But we can fill in the gaps between the lines. Maybe the person that you're playing in this game is actually a believer, and so the reason they are able to thrive in hell, which again I still think that you have to just suspend disbelief about a whole bunch of stuff, but if you can do that, but not have trouble with this part, maybe this is a believer, and that's the reason because they have the Holy Spirit protecting them and empowering them and allowing them to survive in this environment and against these demons. And what do you do with them? The getting power-ups from pentagrams. Well, maybe this is some kind of a double agent. Maybe in some way that that this believer is being empowered to go in and convince the powers of darkness, that yeah, it's buying into their lies that they can give it power and make it stronger and all that kind of stuff, and it's just kind of playing along, when in truth it's gaining its power all the time from God, the source of all power in the end. So that would be one way that I think you could approach this. And then the third way that I think we can engage in this content without sinning is just to remember and reflect on truth. You know, I mean, as you're going and playing through the game, notice how they're portraying hell, and then go back and look at the Bible or think about the Bible as you're playing. Yeah, okay, well, this lines up. Oh, this doesn't, you know, or whatever, and just kind of, not in a way that's, you know, I'm not saying that this process, if it sounds like that will just suck the fun out of it, for me it really doesn't. I play games all the time that contradict my worldviews and biblical teaching, and I still really enjoy them. But I'm just kind of like taking note as I go through of, like, you know, oh, okay, well, that is, you know, from this school of thought, and that's broken philosophy. That's just illogical. It just doesn't make any sense. It's just not truth, you know. And this does line up. This doesn't line up with Scripture, and so forth, you know. But I still have a blast playing all these kind of games, and I think just having an awareness of that and just kind of like differentiating between, you know, the different ideas being presented and that which is actually truth is a way that we can absolutely engage in this kind of content. So all that to say, I think the game looks really cool. I will probably suck at it terribly because I suck at shooters, but I do want to give it a try. So anyway, let me know what you thought of the footage that you saw, and whether or not you're going to try out this game. And then after that, I hope you go on over to Christian Geek Central as we continue to geek out together and seek the truth.
ChristianGeekCentral.com